Anthony Sutton's trilogy: Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, Wall Street and FDR, Wall Street and Hitler. Oh, interesting. You might see that the people who funded the Nazis then kind of preserved the Nazis after the Nazis left the stage. All right, so we have several things to cover left in this episode. We did talk at the beginning about Elon Musk selling X to himself for $33 billion. That's going to be something that we're going to want to, just see how that works out. Like, that's news, but I don't understand what it means or what his angle was or why he did that or what comes of it. Maybe the WeChat comes faster, maybe it comes slower. I think it would probably come faster if he's making moves like that. So I think that's a sign of him about to pick up his foot and take another step toward a goal of like going to Mars. But you need AI to do these things, and I think they're using the good people on X and all their little typing to train that grok so they could do just that. So we're gonna have to keep an eye on that. But first, we got to make a right turn at 9/11 because apparently there was some insider trading. Again, not by the guys who were suicide bombing Islamist extremists with box cutters who didn't have flight training but somehow flew these things at ways that professional pilots can't replicate in a simulator. Nothing to see there, and also nothing to see in the insider trading that might go back to relatives of the Bush family who also had been in bed financially with the Saudi bin Laden group and the brother of Osama bin Laden named Salim since the mid-1970s. So when you have a group of people who are up to no good and they have a long history together, and then they come out on opposing sides one day and they're fighting each other, maybe that's some pro wrestling there, because they could be at the Carlisle group meeting that morning with the Bush family and the bin Laden family, and in the same day, Bush family and bin Laden family are at war on American TV, war on freedom, war on terror, all this sort of stuff that goes on for 20 years. I think we should start taking a closer look at these things, especially since people are in the new age of realizing government conspiracies are a real thing and that they're still hiding stuff, even though they claim they release stuff. It's like, come on. If they weren't really hiding stuff, they wouldn't still be really hiding stuff, which they are. So it points to even more guilt. And they know they are. Otherwise, they just release it and be like, what's up? We did that stuff. We're gangsters, So anyway, we're going to hit Jimmy Dore. Bush relatives shorted the market right before 9/11 with James Corbett. And then Lionel Nation. It's just going to be a short piece of this. Candace Owens exposes RFK Jr., says he's being blackmailed by, and then there's an ellipsis. That's the 3 dots right there. It's also the phone code in the new James Bond movie back in 2006 with Daniel Craig. That's how the whole movie starts, which also mentions insider trading on terrorist attacks. So we'll just leave that one there. And then Javier Milei, that dude from Argentina who's like the wacky Trump guy down there, he shocked the world by releasing documents of Hitler's exodus to Argentina, like he wasn't killed in the bunker. Now, who'd have thunk some people would have told us a bunk story about what happened at the end of the Third Reich? The same people who funded the Third Reich, protected the Third Reich, helped the companies survive the Third Reich, like all that stuff that went on with Operation Paperclip and being really close with those Nazis, that might have had a continuity down under, not in Australia, which was formerly a prison colony, but in South America, in Argentina, where they have little towns that are just like little Bavarian towns down there with German words on the signs and all sorts of interesting things that go on. So there's a little bit of speculation in that story, but I just told you there's some speculation. So now we can look at it with some incredulity and see if there's any evidence or at least get into that line of research, because there's been a lot of books and claims over the years. There's various escape stories and submarines and all these things involved. But there were some good series covered by Dave Emery. And I'm trying to remember, it was like Escape of the Wolf or something like that was the series back in the day. So I will look for those references, but please enjoy the following selections of Truth, starring Jimmy Dore, James Corbett, Lionel, Candace, and the last one is brought to us by Redacted. So that's Clayton and Natalie. And let's see what we can learn about history juxtaposed with this week's news.
One of the things that started to wake me up, and you too, was 9/11. And once you look into it, which they shamed people, just like you weren't supposed to do your own research around COVID, because if you looked into it, you would find out they were lying to you about everything. everything from who funded the creation of the virus to the fatality rate of the virus to the contraction and transmission to lockdowns to masks to there wasn't to natural immunity and herd immunity. It wasn't a thing they didn't like. So that's why they had to shame you as hard to not look into COVID, because as soon as you did your own research, you would find out you were being lied to on a scale that your mind almost can't comprehend. And most people's minds can't. And that started with me with Building 7. And I realized that a steel building doesn't fall into its own footprint because a plane hit another building a couple hundred yards away. That doesn't happen. It's never happened before. It's never happened since. It happened 3 times on one day. And there were people who made massive bets. It's called shorting now. They would call them puts back then. So if you think a stock of a business is going to go down, you can make a bet on that, and then you can collect when their stock goes down. And there was people who did that right before 9/11 to companies like United Airlines, American Airlines, stuff like that. People that businesses we knew would go down after 9/11. And I just want you to, could you just tell people, who is Mr. and Mrs. Wirt D. Walker III? Just tell people who that is.
So Wirt Walker, as people might be able to guess from that name, yeah, Walker, George Herbert Walker Bush, George Walker Bush. Oh yeah, okay, a distant relation to the Bush family itself.
What we're seeing is one of the most important stories at so many levels. First, new journalism. Journalism, I hate that word. I despise it. Journalism, I don't know what that means. Journalism is also opinionating. It's a lot of words. It's a lot of good stuff. It does not mean the facts versus we have a new group of people. So powerful, so smart. Never went to J schools. Candace Owens is in this one. Ian Carroll, others. And observations I have told you, and I'm not doing I told you this first, but I told you regarding Bobby Kennedy the night that Mrs. L and I saw him. And Nutzi may have been there, I don't know. But the night that we saw them at the Glass House, and I saw this man sold his soul to Shmuley Boteach. It was like a ransom video, or it's like Jeremiah Denton torture. We talked about that. We talked about the Israeli lobby. We talked about blackmail. We talked about extortion. And we talked about what's happening now and these new journalists and why I've been telling you, why has Bobby Kennedy, how many times have I told you this? Why isn't he talking about vaccines? Why isn't he talking about the JFK assassination? Why is he talking about red dye and everything? I also told you, when you have somebody who's been a heroin addict, who also is a sex addict, they're very susceptible to blackmail. If you remember this, I'm not doing the old, I'm so smart, I told you this, but I told you this because I knew this was coming. I saw this was happening. He is owned. Does President Trump know this? Yes.
I think most people know this story and who have studied the subject know that Adolf Hitler didn't kill himself in a bunker in Berlin as the Red Army closed in. I think that's, we all know that was a fabricated story, or if you watch this show, you probably understand that. Hitler actually fled Germany weeks before that using a group of underground tunnels that led to an airstrip. And that airstrip was flown. He was flown from Berlin out. It took submarines, or multiple submarines that were used, U-boats that were then sent to Argentina. In other words, Hitler lived for nearly 2 decades more in Argentina, along with vast numbers of the Third Reich. Well, now Argentinian President Javier Milei has just ordered the release of all remaining documents on all of those Nazis who fled Germany and moved to Argentina after World War II. Basically, it was almost like a second base of operations in Argentina. If you're not familiar with that, like basically the Third Reich operated out of Argentina and Germany. And many of them, including Adolf Hitler, lived in Argentina well after 1945.
Yeah, it's rebunked. It's not
Rebunked,
debunked.
baby.
Yeah.
Hitler has been rebunked. I'm gonna have to do an episode on that.
All right,
Come
so
on.
my reference was Dave Emery, so I went and looked it up on spitfirelist.com. For the record, number 914 and for the record, number 915. Interviews with Gerard Williams, author of Grey Wolf, The Escape of Adolf Hitler. Now, this says posted by Dave Emery 2016, but I'm pretty sure this is from the 1980s or 90s, the original interview. Anyway, if you are into this type of work, Dave Emery is an anti-fascist researcher who was like pre-internet, and the archives of his work are invaluable. So if you're into listening to well-documented, like pedantically documented history, I have gotten many books in my library from listening to Dave Emery back in the day. I learned about the old boys, Burton Hirsch, which is the origins of the CIA and Wall Street and MI6 and stuff like that. So he didn't have all the facts, but he was a studious academic who covered a lot of that type of topic back in the day. And before I have my comment on what we just heard, I wanted to get your perspective, Scott, and then we'll go to Paul.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, just from the perspective of Rebunked News, I mean, I knew about the fact about the skull fragment being DNA or whatever tested and coming up female. And I was actually doing some digging here, and there is the photo and document of Hitler, like a photograph allegedly from some sort of secret unclassified document talking about Adolf Hitler. And then there is apparently in like this is microfilmed in 1963, but I believe this is from like the 50s, allegedly 1955 supposedly is where that picture was taken. So who knows? But there's information out there that does point to maybe perhaps possibly some sort of situation where Hitler lived out the rest of his days in Argentina.
You have to weigh the evidence.
Yeah. So interesting stuff. I'm gonna have to rebunk that one this week for sure.
Well, it's totally possible that, Hitler's hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein and a few other people who've been suicided or made to disappear. And you never can tell with plastic surgery and all these other things, but that's a whole other rabbit hole. I just wanted to say it was great to see Corbett on Jimmy Dore and getting some exposure.
Yeah.
That made me very happy. And yeah, Corbett's just like, his presentation game is just top notch now. He's got the humor, he's got the anecdotes, he's got the animation, and it's just so great to see him at the top of his game, finally getting some, some big name interviews like Jimmy Dore and hopefully on a few others.
Only took him like 20 years to get to where Ian, what's his name, got in like a couple weeks, couple months.
Oh yeah, Ian Carroll, exactly. Yeah, I know. It's crazy how persuasive rhetoric comes in so many different shapes and forms, but Corbett lets you know, you just keep plugging away, and even if you get banned off YouTube, you can still find your way back to getting re-platformed, as it were. So, and yeah, RFK and the whole blackmail thing. Is it a surprise that any of these people are blackmailed? I expect anyone in any position of significant power who's taking some positions that are not quite logical or reasonable to probably be blackmailed. That's usually a pretty logical explanation for why they're doing something irrational.
Bribes or blackmail.
Or bought off. It's the two things, money and blackmail.
Or bottom of a lake.
Yeah, the three options. So, yeah, it's a heck of a story, but thankfully people are catching on, and podcasts like this help put all the pieces together. So,
but only for people with long attention spans. If you take the pieces, you can't really put it together too easily. It's not as easy as a jigsaw puzzle. But if you watch it all at once, it's very understandable.
Yeah, and providing that common thread to go through everything and see, like with your brain model, how it's all connected. I don't see anyone else doing something like that. So it's nice that you can keep adding these little elements and mapping out a bigger and bigger picture of what's really going on.
Well, if we were to start with Anthony Sutton's trilogy, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, Wall Street and FDR, Wall Street and Hitler. Oh, interesting. You might see that the people who funded the Nazis then kind of preserved the Nazis after the Nazis left the stage, right? And you might have people in history like Otto Skorzeny, who might have been under Operation Paperclip, one of these people they brought back. And there's some recent evidence in the last 10 years, there were claims that Skorzeny's in the Bush family. There was some intimate relationship and had to do with people changing their name from George Scherf to George Herbert Walker Bush. I don't know if those things are, in play, but Prescott Bush and the Bushes that came before him, maybe they're like Pierre Trudeau and they share around. I don't know how all that works. So there's some intricacies that we don't need to get into. But my point would be the people who funded the Nazis had the Nazis perpetrate a whole bunch of eugenics and genocide and things that they later wanted to study and kind of roll into molecular biology. And as these people who funded the Nazis continued to rise to power after World War II, there were some people who said, hey, wait a minute. You guys funded the Nazis. And I'm going to tell everybody, unless you give me a state called Israel. And that might have been Reuven Shiloh or Shiloah that we talked about last week, who founded the Mossad and who is among the people who sent people in to blackmail Nelson Rockefeller in 1947 to get his Latin American votes. Now, let me ask a question. If you could blackmail Rockefeller and Allen Dulles, his attorney back then, and get your own country, when does that blackmail expire? It doesn't have an expiration date, does it? And then if you're going to continue leveraging that doesn't have an expiration date blackmail, who can you let be in power of this country during the time between, let's say, the killing of Kennedy and present day? Well, people who funded the Nazis can probably be the people that'll work with you on that because they don't want anyone to know that they funded the Nazis. Now, the Bush family had a huge rise to power after Jack Kennedy left the stage. And H.W. Bush is seen in Dallas on the day of, and there's pictures of him. But he also wrote a warning letter to Hoover about someone trying to kill Kennedy, right? And that was before H.W. Bush was in the CIA, but he later becomes the director of the CIA during the whole Church Committee, Rockefeller Commission investigation into themselves. So if you play it forward with H.W. Bush being VP, blackmailable his family is for funding the Nazis. Reagan as your frontispiece, kind of like here's the unwitting dupe rube that can be saying all the happy things, while you got Iran-Contra and BCCI and those other things percolating behind the scenes. By the time you get up to 9/11, you got W. Bush in a Florida school while H.W. Bush sleeps at the White House the night of 9/11, the morning, like that night before, Monday the 10th into Tuesday the 11th. And then late, as the attacks are going on in 9/11, H.W. Bush is at a Carlyle Group meeting. Carlyle Group's like a big defense military industrialist contractor. And they have the Bush bin Laden, the bin Laden family is represented there because they're partners, right? And then you take into account the Nazi supporting skull and bones, drug smuggling Bush family have been dealing with Salim bin Laden all the way back to like 1976. And there's this whole undercurrent of narco-terrorism, Anglo-American gladio type of terrorism, and things that would, bring about a new Pearl Harbor or make us have to have a Patriot Act and weaken America. If the stat is that Americans have lost trust in government since Jack Kennedy was assassinated, wouldn't that be the goal of the Anglo-American Israeli establishment, to decrease Americans' trust in our government and our way of life to the point where it's eroded so much that you have some obvious shenanigans going on in this one nation under blackmail? And yet most of the people who voted for Trump have no clue of like what's coming in the door with him as far as these agendas that either Trump is subservient to in a variety of ways, blind to, or unwilling to act on. I don't think any of those are strong America first positions, personally. So that's
Such a good point. there. At what point do we just say like America only? Like forget all of it, dude. Like I'm
Look,
so
I hope
sick of it.
people
dude.
around the world can find freedom,
Yes,
but it's not
that's
America's job to spread freedom through military force and bombing, children with daisy cutters in the Middle East and stuff like that, or Afghanistan more specifically. But as long as we continue to be the military industrial complex, Anglo-American establishment property keepers, managers around the world, we are expected as Americans to like send our military and be a show of force. We are the developers of all the crazy cruise missiles and military accoutrements to protect that British Commonwealth of all those countries around the world that speak the English language, or at least have the Queen or King on their money. Let's just put it like that. The fact that the UN has like the UK Commonwealth has like 47 votes in the UN to our one vote. So if the if Mossad Haganah blackmailed Nelson Rockefeller through the United Nations votes to become a country in the first place, like there is something there to be learned and studied and maybe keep an eye on, because it continues to precipitate a whole lot of tyranny and unfreedom into our environment. That's all I'm saying. But we don't have to continue to tug on that cord. We've laid it on the line and put out the story as it's happened for the past week. So we'll see what happens this next coming week. Maybe there'll be no more Nazi blackmailable, stories. Maybe everything will be separate from what we talked about tonight. But we'll wait and see. All right. So Scott, where can people find out more about your work? And then we'll go to the thank yous.
Yeah, so I made it real easy. Just go to rebunk.news. That's my redirect to my link tree that has all my projects on there. I'm going to work on a new site here soon, but for the time being, that's how you can support. That's how you can sign up for the Substack. That's how you can find me on social media, Clip Genie, everything, rebunk.news. Hit me up.
Rock on. What about you, Paul?
You can check me out at youtube.com/at Chet System, CHETSYSTEM, for all sorts of silly shenanigans and fun conspiracy videos.
I want to congratulate you both for doing banger reports this week. And I hope that people do either go to your Substack or your YouTube pages and see the full report, because there's a lot more to be learned, and we don't have time to include the full report in tonight's episode. Colby, thank you for playing all the clips tonight with excellence and thoughtfully responding to the audibles as they came through. Who do we have to thank in addition to our wonderful Grand Theft World membership members from the chats tonight?
All right, over on Rockfin, we've got $20 from Mitchell T, who said thanks. And then we've got $100 from Kamala Soul, who says, in memory of Gary Webb and Kiki Camarena.
Kiki Camarena. You want to find out who killed Kiki? You watch this show, and then you go watch The Last Narc on Amazon, and you put together the names we've referenced. Most of those names we've referenced, and some of those people are still not only former very close associates of George H.W. Bush and the other people who prospered and might have been blackmailed by another nation, but they're still walking around. They're still available for interview, for instance, those sort of things. So thank you. And I don't think Gary Webb shot himself twice in the head. That's my personal take on it. In future weeks, we're going to have all the chats on grandtheftworld.com, so you can watch live and we can follow some of the chats and make them more integral in the show. And we're going to make it available to members first. So if you are a member, that'll be a new feature rolling out for members, in addition to some other stuff that we have up our sleeves, but soon to be disclosed. Any others, Colby, before I move to the closure here?
That's all I saw.
Right on. Well, I thank you guys all for the support, moral support, financial support. All those things are important to making this show go. But really what you could do is you can find the most interesting thing that you learned and use Clip Genie and share it with a friend, post it on your social media, let other people know that there's a group of people who participate in a podcast who have been paying attention for too long, to quote Aaron Dykes and Melissa Dykes and Truth Stream Media. I think that was last week in their report. We've been paying attention too long. We can see these things so clearly, but we don't want to assume that everyone who just started paying attention can see all these things. For instance, I'll close it out like this. There's a stat I learned yesterday, and I was really surprised by it. The stat is only 10% of people can look at some unfinished, insert blank there, and then see it in its final state, like in its finished state. It could be looking at a broken down house and being able to see it renovated. It could be looking at a broken down bicycle and being able to see it fixed and on the street and being ridden around. It could be looking at a person who's demoralized and being able to see them in their full potential, if only they weren't restrained by ignorance and learned helplessness and a bunch of other stuff. I thought 90% of people could see that and only 10% of people couldn't see that. So I'm going to do a better job of kind of filling in from where things are to where I see they could be and how to get from A to B, instead of just assuming like, well, of course everyone could see it in the fixed state and it should be logical on how to make it fixed. I'll try to do a better job because I realize I'm in a slim 10% category of being able to see things and then envision something stronger. But I think we all have that capability. And I'd like to see that eventually go up to like 20%, 30%, 50%. And then we can get it to like 80% of people can see from A to B and know how to get there. And then we just help that other 10% to see. But right now we got the uphill battle, and Sisyphus was happy in his work, I believe. All right, with all that being said, we do have something special. So I'd like to thank you guys all for tuning in and not dropping out. Here's Tom McDonald with a new song called Can't Cancel All of Us to play us out. See you guys next week, and we'll have new, better improvements. Peace.
Twice a year, I teach a course called Autonomy. It's a 12-week course. It teaches leadership, entrepreneur skills, executive skills, all these types of things that I saw were taken out of our education system in order to make the schooling or indoctrination system that we've all probably went through. And it has served us well enough to be interchangeable cogs in the machine of the globalists. But if we want a homestead, if we want write our own ticket, work from home job, work from anywhere type of situation, they're not exactly handing those out at the end of college. They give you a piece of paper and they're like, good luck. So reality is dropping us off here, but the demands of reality are up here. So I created Autonomy to help people close that gap for themselves so they can level up their skills to the demands of the situations that life is putting in front of us presently. Life's demands of intellect and understanding precision and complexity are ever increasing. The schooling didn't prepare us for it. The media is not going to do anything but reinforce what schooling prepared us for. And so we're going to have to take a leadership position and take steps off the beaten path to kind of blaze our own trail in life. What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man.